And this is a chat hosted by IDF Cape Town, IDF Johannesburg, and IDF Pretoria, all coming together to kind of bring people together and speak about interesting ideas. So I'm just gonna kick it off and let Jono and Deirdre get into it. Thanks.
Cool. Hi, everybody. Let me just start sharing my screen here. Can everybody see my screen?
Yes.
Yes, we can.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Alrighty, so before we begin, I think introductions are in order, just about who Jono and I am. So Jono, I'll hand over to you. You can kick us off.
Cool, thanks very much. So yeah, I've been at Intellect now 18 months. I'm one of the seniors on the team there. I've been doing UX close to 10 years now. So I've learned a thing or two in that time. I'm quite a big fan of accessibility just because I think people often forget about it. You know, we spend a lot of time working and focusing on core things that our clients care about, but occasionally we tend to forget that certain users have certain issues, and I've always tried to raise awareness around that. I do wear glasses. If I take them off, I'm quite sightless. So yeah, accessibility has always been something that's been close to my heart, and that's pretty much me, short and sweet.
Cool. Alrighty. Yeah, just a little bit about myself. I've been practicing UX for about 6 years now, and I've been at Intellect for about almost a year now. It's quite interesting working with all of your colleagues, having met almost nobody in real life because I moved mid-pandemic. A little bit about why I'm quite passionate about accessibility and inclusive design is my husband is colorblind, and I didn't immediately realize how differently they interact, or any person with like colorblindness interacts with websites or any app for that matter. And I realized how easy it is for us who do not have any form of disability go through life a little bit ignorant and not really having empathy for people around us. And seeing how he had to change some of his ways just to be able to interact with things successfully has given me quite a bit of empathy, and therefore I'm quite a big advocate for accessibility and inclusive design. Yeah. So with that in mind, let's kick it off. So, you know, today we're going to be talking about inclusive design for diverse disabilities and looking a little bit about best practices for web accessibility guidelines. So for those of you who did attend the previous session around accessibility, we did talk quite a bit about accessibility and disabilities in physical spaces. So how people with any physical disability or visual, etc., disability, how they interact with physical spaces and physical things. For this session, however, we're going to focus a little bit about visuals on, or not visuals, but web accessibility. So how people interact with firstly websites or apps or any digital interface. So I think just a little bit of stats around disabilities all over the world. So 15% of people worldwide experience some form of disability, and that's around 1 billion people. That's quite a lot. And the bad thing is, the last time these stats were measured was in 2011. So this came from the World Health Organization. What is even more scary is the last census that checked the disability stats in SA was also in 2011 for South Africa. And that estimates South African disabilities at about roughly 7.4%. But I think it's important to note that this doesn't include psychosocial disabilities. So this would include depression and anxiety, for instance. And I think it's important to consider as well that we are a third world country and that we do have quite a few rural areas. And unfortunately, that means that there's quite a few people who are disabled who or who have some form of disability and it's undocumented. So while the census estimated at 7.4%, we can just guess that it is probably a lot higher. So when we talk about web accessibility, the WCAG, or that's the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines. So just a little bit more on that. It's a guideline, there's a website for it online, where it gives you all the guidelines to create web content that's a lot more accessible. It's something that can be used worldwide, and it's a good measurement to ensure that something is accessible. And they reckon that there's about 5 types of accessibility that we should be catering for. So firstly is visual. So this might be somebody who is blind or colorblind or even partially sighted. So this is any form of disability that affects your visuals and what you can see. Secondly, we have motor and mobility. So this could be a wheelchair user, somebody who's an amputee, or it could also be somebody who's got a slight tremor. Third, we've got auditory. So this is somebody who's hard of hearing, somebody who's deaf, or it could be somebody who's got a constant ringing in their ear. We then have cognitive. So this could be dyslexia, ADHD, autism. And lastly, we've got seizures. So this is somebody with photosensitive epilepsy. So just to give a little bit of a description, there's an illustration of somebody that's holding a video or a play button, I guess. And this is because in a lot of music videos that some groups bring out, if there's a lot of flashing imagery, they do give a warning beforehand, because this can trigger epilepsy in some people. It's important to keep that in mind. However, even though there's 5 types of disability or accessibilities, we can understand that there's a lot more that goes into this. We can also look at somebody who's got anxiety, depression, or autism, and even somebody with old age. So we can, when we look at, older people such as our parents, for instance, or grandparents, I'm sure all of us have seen that they interact with websites or digital content quite differently to how we do. We've all experienced when we want to show somebody something that somebody who wears glasses would, extend their arm quite further away so that they're able to easily read something on a screen. And I think it's important to keep that in mind, that even though the guidelines state that there's only 5 types of accessibility that we're trying to cater for, it's important to know that there's much more than that. Alrighty. So I guess this is the important question, is how do we solution for this? So I know this sounds very, very easy, solving for one and benefiting many, but I think it's important to also just understand a little bit how we can look at disability. So we can understand that somebody could be a permanent or could have a permanent disability. So this could be somebody who's an amputee, but somebody who has a temporary disability could be somebody whose arm is broken. So for the next few months, while their arm is in a sling, they might not be able to have use of that arm. Then we can also look at somebody who's situational. So a new parent is somebody we can consider to have a situational disability. While carrying their young child, they might also just have one hand available to them. And the thing is, when we consider that there's a vast range of this disabilities, when we solve for one, we're catering for many. And there's a name for that. We call this the curb cut effect. So just to explain the image that's on screen at the moment, it is a picture of a curbside with the road, and then there is the slight incline that a wheelchair user would use to get on top of the sidewalk from the road and not to hit into the curbside. So why do we call this the curb cut effect? Initially, the curb cut was designed for somebody who uses a wheelchair. So this makes streets and the sidewalk accessible to them, and it's easier for them to move around. However, somebody with a trolley full of groceries, a pram with a baby, or even with their bags if they're traveling, it makes it easier for them to travel around too, because now everything that they have that also has wheels is able to move easily from the street onto the sidewalk. Now, if we look at this in a practical sense for web accessibility, if we design something that's got high contrast and we have somebody who is partially sighted, they're able to see everything on the screen because it is high contrast. However, if we have a colorblind user and we used colors and they're not able to see those colors, it doesn't matter because it's high contrast enough for them that they can still differentiate between the background and the foreground color. So this brings me to the WCAG standards. So as I mentioned, WCAG stands for Web Content Accessibility Guidelines. So there's some people who like to refer to this as WCAG. I'm not a fan of that, and I'm not going to be referring to it as WCAG. I'll just keep saying WCAG. But they have a bunch of guidelines online for us available to help us create more accessible web content. It is a little bit difficult and overwhelming for a first-time person coming onto this website and reading all of the guidelines that's there, especially because they don't always use, plain human terms. They like to use quite big words, and for somebody who doesn't have a lot of context around this, it might be a little bit overwhelming. So I'm going to touch on a few of these guidelines, but I'm not going to use the big words that they use online. But what I want to mention is that the WCAG has 3 levels of accessibility compliance, and this is A, AA, or AAA. All that this means is, let's say that there's 9 guidelines that they want you to adhere to. If you adhere to 3 of them, they would consider you level A compliant. If you adhere to 6 of them, that would be level AA compliant. And if you adhere to all 9, level AAA. It is quite difficult to create content that is AAA compliant. So best practice is to try and aim for AA. We know it's not always possible, but I think it's important that any attempt that you make to try and be a bit more accessible is better than leaving it as is and just deciding to not do anything. All right, before I continue on with the best practices and some standards, are there any questions? I just want to see if I can open the chat here. There we go. Does anybody have any questions? Cool. All right, I'm going to continue then. Okay, so let's have a look at what we consider best practices and standards. So firstly, I'm going to look at colors and icons. So just an explanation of the imagery that is currently on screen. There's 4 screenshots of an app called 2 dots. The first 2 screenshots, or let's go from 1 to 4. The first screenshot is an image of what the app looks like. There's a few dots on screen and all of them are different colors. There's green and red and blue, and then the background is yellow. So this is what we can consider an everyday user would see if they were to use 2 dots. Then the second screenshot is the exact same layout. However, the background color has been removed. There's no yellow background anymore. It's now white. And all of the colors have changed. So the dots that used to be white is now yellow. The green dots are still green, but it's a slightly different shade of green. I think that's important to show here is the dots are no longer just colors. They also have icons in them. So this is for somebody who is colorblind. They would still be able to interact with this app easily, even though they are colorblind, because they don't have to look at the colors and match the colors. They match the shapes. Then in the third view, that is a simulation of what a protonopian colorblind person would see. So the yellows have turned into this kind of sickly green color. The green dots have turned into gray. The red dots have also turned into gray. And it's very difficult to differentiate between the colors. In the fourth screenshot, it's the colorblind simulation version, also with the colorblind simulation of protonopian over. So the colors are still a little bit more difficult to differentiate, but because they are shapes, it's easier to match them. So what this means in practice is that color shouldn't be your only means of differentiation or trying to communicate something. The same goes for icons, because icons isn't a universal language. Certain shapes and certain images mean something different for different cultures, different contents, different countries. So that brings me to the next one, which is just an extension of color, contrast, and size. So what I'm currently showing on screen is 2 screenshots of a Figma plugin called Contrast. And this plugin you can use to measure the contrast between 2 colors to ensure that it is accessible according to web accessibility guidelines. Between these 2 screenshots, there are 2 pink blocks, and both of them have text on them. The text for both of them are in a reddish color. And in the first block, you can see it says, "You can read me, I'm 14 pixels." In the second block, it says, "You can't read me, I'm 10 pixels." So what this means is, firstly, look at the size of your font. Ensure that it's big enough that somebody without glasses can obviously read it. But for somebody who does wear glasses, is maybe short-sighted or partially sighted, that they can still be able to read. But then more importantly, to ensure that the contrast between the foreground color and the background color is high enough. So just to explain what the screenshots of the plugin look like, it simulates the 2 colors, the background and the foreground color, and it tells you the contrast ratio and whether that is successful for normal, large, or graphic text, and then whether it's a pass for AA compliance or AAA compliance. In the first screenshot, that shows the contrast of the first block that says, "You can read me, I'm 14 pixels." So on the screenshot, it shows the normal text, large text, and graphic that passes on a AA level because the contrast is high enough. Then on the second screenshot, that shows the "You can't read me, I'm 10 pixels. It fails on every level. The contrast is too low and nobody would be able to read that, especially if they are colorblind, once again, or if they are partially sighted. Then, once again, a little bit of an extension on that, errors. So what I'm currently showing is an entry field. And in the first entry field, it shows that somebody is typing and there is a green tick mark. In the second field, it says, "I'm typing this," and there's a loader. But then in the third field, it says, "This is what I typed." There is a red, or I should rather say a pink block with a white cross inside. And below the input field, it says, "Error. This is an error message." So once again, as I discussed in the first guideline, color shouldn't be your only means of conveying information. The same with an icon. So here, the 2 are used in conjunction. So we have the red color to show error, but once again, if you are colorblind, you might not see the red, but then there is also the icon with the big cross in it. This then follows the second guideline, which says that input errors should be identified and explained in plain text. Why? Because somebody who does use a screen reader should be able the screen reader should be able to go down the screen and then in context say, "Error, this is an error message." So for instance, if you have a long field or long form that you have to enter, but all of your errors show at the bottom of the screen, if somebody is supposed to go through with the screen reader, they would not know where the error is in the field. So that makes it a bit of a problem. Alrighty. Then next we're moving on to alt text on an image. So that just means alternative text to an image. So for us who can see, it's very plain to see that the image on the screen is 2 cute kittens napping with some wool balls. But the problem is for somebody who cannot see or who uses a screen reader, they would not know what is shown on screen. So we add alternative text because if there isn't a caption below, then it's going to read the alt text. If we don't change the alt text and it's just, saved as image 1, 2, 3, that is not informative at all. And somebody with a screen reader will not understand. So we add the alternative text, which is the second image that just shows an input field where alternative text was added in. It says 2 cute kittens sleeping with balls of wool. That's sufficient for a screen reader to explain to somebody who cannot see what is shown on screen to them.
I think just a comment from my side there, Deirdre, if you can just go back, is don't fall into this case that I think that Microsoft has fallen into, where it's quite generic. So saying, I was playing around and I had to put in a couple of images into a presentation for a report, and it just said graphical interface. That's, again, far too generic for it to be valuable to the user. It needs to be quite specific. So yeah, that's just the only comment from my side.
I'll just say 2 points on the labeling and on the form fields.
Yeah.
I think the big thing with, as the other speaker just said about the form fields, is they're trying to use AI to automate it, because most people are, sorry to say, that lazy to add the alt text or don't know how to add alt text.
Yes.
Or what to put as alt text, and that's why they seem to be so, inaccurate.
Yes.
And on the point of the form that you just displayed, if I may also just add a point there, can everybody please remember to label, to make sure that the labels that they add, I saw on the form, you had some labels above the text boxes. If those labels aren't properly embedded or nested with the edit control, a screen reader also won't be able to see what to put into those form fields.
Yes.
If that makes sense.
Yeah, no, that makes perfect sense. Yeah, I think Ranesh, you're obviously a good person to have in this session, because you understand firsthand how, I mean, for lack of a better word, how shitty it is to have to interact with things that people didn't consider accessible design for.
Thanks so much for that. And quite right. If anybody has any questions, like she said, I am a person who uses a screen reader and is, for all practical purposes, very seriously visually impaired. If you have any questions, I'll still be around at the end. So.
Awesome. Yeah, that's great. Thanks, Ranesh. Yeah, Crystal, I see you have your hand up.
Yeah, sorry, it's going to be a quick one. I always wonder, how descriptive do we have to be with these images? So it reads 2 cute kittens sleeping with balls of wool. Cute is, I find, descriptive and relative, but why is it not 2 ginger kittens with a purple and red and white wool ball? Where is the line of our descriptiveness that comes with our alt text?
I think what's important is to remember the context and the purpose of an image. So if, for instance, you are advertising kittens that you want to sell, it's important to obviously know the color of the kitten's coat. If it's the balls of wool that you're selling, then that's also important. If I maybe just have a website where, I want to add, it's just a repository of a bunch of cute kitten images, for instance, then you don't need to be that descriptive. I mean, I guess we can continue into no end and add on that the 2 kittens are sleeping and it looks like a wooden crate with a wooden background and they've got pink noses, but consider the user and what is the information that they're supposed to be getting from this image. And if you look at this image, what would you find helpful in the context of the greater site or the content that's around it? Awesome. Alrighty. Next, I'm moving on to navigation. So it's important to keep navigation consistent. So I've got 2 screenshots on here, and for anybody who has been working on Teams quite a bit, they recently changed, or not too recently, but recent enough, they changed the layout when you're in a call. So the first image is the old layout where you would have kind of like a floating action toolbar in the middle of the screen where it has all of your actions that you can do. So switch on your camera, mute or unmute, share your screen, more actions, the chat, etc. And at the end, you would have had your leave call button, which is in red. And recently they changed it and they moved all of your actions to be kind of like a sticky header at the top of the screen. But what sucked is they completely changed the ordering. So in the beginning, you had mute and unmute as your second option, where in the new layout, it's your sixth option. Yeah. So I know that there were quite a few people who would accidentally switch on their cameras, or they would accidentally start sharing the screen, or even worse, completely leave the phone call because they're so used to just moving their hand to one specific area on the screen and clicking without thinking that after the navigation was changed, people were a little bit confused. So yeah, try to keep navigation as consistent as possible. This extends just to, for instance, if you're creating a website, if you have a burger menu and all of your options are next to each other, keep it that way. Don't have a burger menu on the one screen, and if you navigate a little bit deeper, now you have, I don't know, a sticky header, and you go even a little bit deeper, and now you've got breadcrumbs. Keep it consistent. Which brings us to consistency of layout. Once again, it's important for screen readers to not have your crap all over the place and have a little bit of text left and a little bit of text right. Just think of reading from top to bottom, right? You read from top to bottom, left to right. So don't have a text box left and then another text box right in the corner. It makes it difficult for screen readers, and then stuff seems very incoherent. And then that extends to also the device that you're reading something on. So have a consistent design across all your platforms. So that includes viewing something on a laptop versus an iPad, for instance, or your cell phone. Cool. Next, we're looking at links and buttons. So links and buttons need to be descriptive. So once again, for screen readers, but then also for any user, I'd like to know what I'm going to do, and I'd like to know what's going to happen if I click on something. So in the image that I'm showing currently, it's two blocks, and both of them have two action buttons. So the first one says, are you sure you want to cancel your subscription? And then it says, firstly, cancel, and the next button says, cancel subscription. That is very confusing. Why is there cancel twice? That doesn't make sense at all. And then the second one says, are you sure you want to cancel your subscription? The first button says, keep plan. The second one says, cancel subscription. This is a lot more descriptive, clearly shows me, cool, if I click the first button, I'm keeping my plan. And if I click the second button, I'm canceling my subscription. This also is the same for any links that's in text, for instance. Don't just have something at the end that says link. That doesn't tell me anything, and it doesn't tell me where I'm going to go or what's going to happen. So be descriptive. And, you know, if it's a link that's going to take me to a cute kitten website, then call it cute kitten website. And it's underlined, and I know, cool, if I'm going to click on this, it's going to take me to the cute kitten website. And then Ranesh added in the chat for anybody who missed it. Also, please check your tab order. So what this means is if you have a form field and you click tab to tab through everything, have it in order and have it go normally, right? So don't have it jump all over the place, because that's just going to be confusing. So in the same way you would enter your information top to bottom, same for tabbing. Let it tab from top to bottom. And then accessible is inclusive, and designing from empathy will create an inclusive design for all people. It brings us back to the curb cutting effect. It takes nothing to be an advocate for accessibility. It takes nothing to be on your project and say, cool, I'm going to design something that has high enough contrast, to sit with your developers and ensure, because unfortunately, a lot of the accessibility guidelines sits on the onus of the developer as well, but to sit with them and advocate and inform them and make them understand that a user who has some form of disability, that means that the website isn't accessible to them. That means bad UX ultimately, and you're alienating some of your users, and that's never a good idea. And then another thing that I added is an inclusive design for all people. I didn't want to add the word user, because I think that referring to users as users all the time kind of dehumanizes them, and ultimately they're still people with feelings, and it sucks to not be able to interact with something. And yeah, that brings us to the end of the, let's call it the informative part of tonight, so the presentation. And we're going to move into the design challenge now, the activity. So before we continue, is there any questions from anybody?
I'd like to ask a question, Deirdre.
Yeah.
Cool. Yeah. I think in terms of UX design that we do practice, it sometimes seems so counterintuitive to accessibility. Even designing for all people, we always design for your personas, your niche markets. And then in terms of like designing symbols, when you're designing something, you put in the least, not the least, or just the right amount of cues so that a user can recognize it. An example would be like the Shell logo. When it becomes easily recognizable, you just have enough cues so that it's easily recognizable. And I feel sometimes accessibility design requires a different sort of thinking and processing. And how do you actually combat that when you're doing your everyday designs?
Absolutely. Yeah, you're 100% right. I remember when I was like, cool, I need to start thinking about people who can't access the web as I do. And it was very daunting and overwhelming at first, and it felt like a huge mountain in front of me. And I think, unfortunately, there will still be a small percentage of people that we're not including in our accessible design for, whether that be because we're not as informed yet, or because we don't know why, or because we didn't consider them as a persona. I think it's important to just start with at least one thing and do one small change to ensure that your design is accessible in some way, shape, or form. So if that means that you're a bit more descriptive with the way that you word buttons, or whether that means that you place your errors in context and you sit with your developers to ensure it gets done that way, it's one step in the right direction. And then as time goes by, you'll find that it kind of becomes second nature. And that's when you open yourself up to, I almost want to call it the next step. So now, cool, you've started advocating for descriptive buttons. Now you're going to start with more or higher contrast in your designs. It isn't easy. It's a lot of information to consume at once, but that's the important thing, is to get the empathy and create a persona that doesn't access the web as we do. That will help with a little bit of empathy and taking that first step into creating a more accessible design. We have quite a few resources available that we're going to share at the end of the presentation. That's also going to help. So for instance, plugins that you can use on Sketch and Figma, plugins for Chrome or for your web browser that you can also use to scan your websites, for instance, and to see if something is accessible. Obviously, it's not 100% accurate. You still kind of need to use your own good judgment there. But just take that first step, because that's all it is. It's just the first step. And rather take that first step than saying, oh, this is so daunting, I don't know where to start, so I'm rather just not going to do anything.
Thanks. I think that's great feedback.
And then Crystal added in the chat, it starts with us and how we normalize it when we start with our designs. Exactly. And at this point for me, I don't even think about it as designing accessible designs anymore. I just see it as designing, because that's all it is, right? It's just a different set of users with a different set of needs, and I just make sure that I cater for that. Yeah, and it was pretty hectic in the beginning, but now, as I said, it's starting to be more second nature. And I don't know everything yet. There's still a lot more that I can learn, but it's just keeping myself on that track to ensure I keep on learning and I don't stop and say, well, I'm an expert now and I know everything and it's going to be great. Any other questions? Alrighty. Cool. So let's practice what we've learned now. Cool, Jono. So are you going to take over here, or would you like me to just go through the design challenge slides and then some of the personas that we've created?
Yeah, I think let's go through the slides and the personas, and then we'll hop onto my shared screen and I'll take over.
Okay, great. And then the one thing I just quickly want to add before I forget, there's a really great website called Cards4 Humanity, not Cards Against Humanity. It's a whole different ball game, that one. The Cards for Humanity helps to just kind of create random personas with some form of disability, and also with a mindset. So for instance, if somebody is very goal orientated, for instance, so that just helps create a little bit of a persona. And if you're not sure how to put yourself in that mindset, it gives you more information about the person, and it helps you just create a quick and small persona of somebody with some form of a disability. Cool. Alrighty, so now we're gonna go into the practical part of things. So we're gonna do a bit of a design challenge. So let's say, very traumatic for everybody, it's Monday, the 21st, the 23rd of March, 2020, and President Ramaphosa has just announced in a family meeting that South Africa will be going into a hard lockdown for 21 days, also known as 50 days. So let's have a look at how universally accessible the Checkers online store is. So all of us know like how mad people rushed and how everybody kind of like hoarded crap from all the stores. So yeah, let's empathize a bit, and we're going to use a simulator to view the site from another person's perspective. So that might help us a little bit to understand the challenges that they experience. And then we're going to write a list of recommendations. So I'm going to just go through some of the personas we're going to be looking at. So firstly, dyslexia. I think I might have copied the wrong text here, but this goes off about dementia, but we're not going to look at dementia, we're looking at dyslexia. So just off the top of my head, dyslexia is people who don't see text the same way that we do. The letters turn around and they jump around, and they have a tough time not only reading but also writing. Then we're going to look at somebody with a slight tremor. So that's an essential tremor. That means your hand shakes a little bit, not like Parkinson's level, but it shakes a little bit. That makes writing and eating and using tools difficult at times. Also consider the way you hold a cell phone, and if you have to interact with some call to actions and it's a small button. So complex or cramped digital user interfaces can be hard for people to use. 1 in 5 people over the age of 65 may have an essential tremor. So that's as of 2019. Next, we're going to look at partially sighted or blind. Sorry, I see there's a bad spelling error there. People who are partially sighted might be using an accessibility aid like a screen reader. Any visual content needs to be described in a written form for the screen reader. So for everybody who's going to be using this persona, look at your inspect tool to kind of see if there's any alternative text. So in 2012, there were 285 million visually impaired people in the world, of which 246 million had low vision and 39 million were blind. And then lastly, we're going to look at people who suffer from anxiety. Some people struggle with tasks and decisions. Some people may need to feel reassured and in control. Consider if you put a timer on something, that might feel a little bit stressful. So more than 300 million people globally suffer from depression, and 260 million suffer from anxiety disorders, many of whom live with both conditions. And keep in mind, this is just what's documented, and we can be sure that there's quite a few more people who have not been diagnosed yet and who's going around with these feelings. So yeah, I'm just going to jump to the last slide because it just says thanks, and we're not going to be coming back to the presentation now. So yeah, thank you for listening to my TED talk. Let's jump over to Jono for some practical things.
Well, thanks very much, Deirdre. That was very good. I'm going to post a link to a Miro board. Please do click on that. We've got a bit of an icebreaker before we dive into our design challenge.
Oh no, can I ask a favor?
Yeah, sure.
Miro board is not accessible. My screen reader just doesn't work with Miro board from what I've experienced. Could you explain what you're going to do with Miro board and how it's going to help us?
Yes, 100%.
it.
Yeah, so I'm just going to wait for everybody to jump on the board. The icebreaker is really just a simple question of do you know someone who struggles with accessibility? So we would just like everybody to hop on the board. And is everybody firstly accustomed to using Miro? If not, you can just press the N button on your keyboard and you'll get a little sticky note icon, and then you can just tell us if you know anyone who struggles with accessibility.
Ranesh, you can just unmute yourself and tell us what you'd like to add, and we will add the sticky note for you. And obviously we would make sure as we go through everything to read out all of the sticky notes so that you know what everybody has added.
Thanks so much. I appreciate that.
Cool.
Ranesh, is there a collaborative whiteboarding tool that you do use that is accessible for you just for interest's sake?
I haven't played with all of them. I have used Microsoft Whiteboard, which seems quite accessible from the bit I've seen. I assume you guys can hear me.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. I thought I just did something weird. Okay, so I've seen Microsoft Whiteboard. I've noticed a few issues between my screen reader versus the Microsoft built-in screen reader with, like I said, Whiteboard. I haven't tested Google Jamboard yet on my to-do list. But yeah. I guess it also depends on how the view is, because from what I'm gauging, what I assume is Miro, this whiteboard that you guys are using, seems to only create a virtual window onto the existing Miro board. So essentially a screen share. Now I haven't tested Whiteboard and Google Jamboard in the screen share environment. But essentially, that's what my opinion is happening with Miro. And because it's a screen share, the underlying embedded text that tells us what's or everything we've spoken about in the session today isn't exposed for my screen reader.
Yeah, and I guess it also doesn't follow like a succinct layout. It's a bit all over the place, so the screen reader also doesn't know where to start.
That too, and again, Tabboard doesn't that help out big time when it comes to that kind of stuff, even if it's just pictures and labels. That's all over the show. Luckily, some screen readers, like the one I've opted for, has magnification capabilities, so I can use it to, assist the screen reader and get it to start where I want it to.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry to interrupt, guys, but I see, unfortunately, I'm a guest editor, so I can't bring you to me. But for those of you that are around the anarchy in UX, you can just zoom out and you'll see we've got a couple of boards set up on the right-hand side.
In the top parts of the screen as well, you'll see that there's a whole list of people. And if you click on the number, you'll see that there's a number 16 or 17. So you can click on somebody's name, such as Jonathan. So then you'll follow Jono, or you can follow me. You'll see I'm Deirdre now. And that just means you're going to come to my viewport and see what I see. And yeah, then everybody can start adding some stickies. If you're not sure how to add a sticky, you can grab somebody else's by holding in the Alt key. Then you're going to copy it, or I'll add a few empty sticky notes here on the left hand side of the board, and you can just grab one of those.
Starting to see some interesting stuff. So just for you, Ranesh, some of the stuff we've seen so far is, I'll go with mine first. My mother-in-law, future mother-in-law, she has an extreme tremor. So sometimes it looks like she's about to throw the phone out of her hand. It does get quite crazy. Got my friend who can't read English. I have dyslexia, so I struggle with text-heavy slides. Somebody else has said the dev they're working with in their current project is colorblind. This is quite a nice one. My grandparents, they're not used to conventional common web layouts. See here, we've got a mom who's partially blind and a father who's colorblind, and a gran that has a hand tremor.
Yeah, if you don't know somebody who struggles with accessibility, you can also just add a sticky that says that you don't know of anybody. That's also fine.
It looks like visual seems to be the most common. Deirdre, are you picking up anything a bit different? I see we've got some colorblind people, friend who's dyslexic, a musician who's almost completely blind, and partially blind. This is quite a nice one as well. My mom doesn't understand icons used in illustration. I think that speaks to Deirdre's point around redundancies and iconography as well as color.
I'm seeing that we have mostly people who suffer from some form of visual impairment, or then also who's struggling with dyslexia. There's quite a common theme around that.
Definitely. So I was just to time box things just in the essence of time, and I'm sure everybody's had a bit of a long day and no one goes too far past 8. So I'm just gonna assume everybody can see my screen. Deirdre, can you see my screen?
Yeah, I can.
Okay, great. So yeah, moving on to the design challenge. So we've got our checkers store here. So not the prettiest website in my subjective opinion, but yeah, this is really, really awesome extension called Funkify, and it's a simulator. So they've got a couple of guys. So I think what we'll do is start off with dyslexia. So you'll see we start here and then things start kind of shifting around the screen. So Renesh, just for you, what it actually does is it starts jumbling up the numbers as well as the letters. So like white button mushrooms does not, well, it keeps changing. It does not even remotely look like white button mushrooms. So yeah, you can kind of see how it starts affecting the text, and you can imagine as somebody who may suffer from dyslexia that this will be quite difficult. So yeah, that's a dyslexia filter, which I think is quite intense. We'll just stop that one. Blurry. So this is what it would look like to experience it through blurry vision or through a foggy filter. So if we allows us to play around with the intensity of the blur, I think let's put it at 3. I think 5 is a bit much. But let me change this. Okay, yeah, so I won't even change it, but Renesh, again, for you, what it does is basically just cast a foggy filter over everything, which makes it very difficult to actually see the text, particularly the smaller text. So things like, again, I'll use white button mushrooms as an example. Quite difficult. And then what we're going to do is go through color blindness. So we've got a couple of different ones. So I think we'll go with photonopia, so red-green. So what you can see here is suddenly everything starts shifting and you start seeing a lot more of this kind of, I guess, olive green, you could call it. So I think this may not have the biggest effect here per se, but where, again, I'll refer to Deirdre's presentation is when it comes to important things like call to action buttons, especially things that may be critical, such as making a payment, just as an example. I know it's not not quite a checkers example. So yeah, that's quite an interesting one. We've also got, should we try Tritanopia? So yeah, you can see here things start changing again. That's Tritanopia is your blue yellow. So now you can just imagine if we had to add, I'm going to try add multiple ones here. So if we look at potentially what an elderly person might see, it's lowered vision and trembling hands. So what this does is it will also affect my mouse cursor. So you can see now things start getting quite difficult. I'm not even touching the mouse at this point. It's just kind of going wild. Everything's quite blurry. The contrast is very intense, and it's, yeah, I can't control the mouse at all. So yeah, you can see how having multiple, sorry about this, having multiple accessibility issues such as lowered vision and trembling hands can cause quite a concern. I think we'll do one more just as an interesting one. We've got simulate sunshine on your screen. So this again is more around your situational. So you can see here, again, everything gets quite heavily affected. The text kind of starts disappearing into the backgrounds. There's a lot of white. The blocks suddenly don't appear quite as blocky, which affects the gestalt areas around it. So yeah, I just wanted to give you a quick little demonstration. I just want to check, are there any comments or questions before we jump into our activity for the evening?
I just want to say that oh, sorry. No, you can go first.
Thanks. What is the website of the tool you used?
It is called Funkify.
Yeah, it's an add-on, an extension to your web browser.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, it's very, very interesting. I discovered this recently. Cool. So what we're going to do now is go back to our little board here. I'm just going to put, unfortunately, there's no timer, but what I am going to do is just put 5 minutes on my phone. And I would like everybody just to follow me to the design challenge recommendation board. So you can just click on that little J on Miro. And yeah, I'm just going to, like I said, put 5 minutes on the board and we can have a bit of a discussion around what we feel the recommendations are. So again, press N on your keyboard to get a sticky note, and we can just put some recommendations down just based off of what you've seen.
I'm adding some empty sticky notes for those who are still having trouble. Yeah, if you're still not sure where we are, you can either click on Jono's name, it's a yellow J, or you can click on my name, it's a DN, and it's just going to take you to the viewport of where we are, and then everybody can come participate with us.
Jono, is this just the landing page of the Checkers website that we can go to if we just want to look at it some more?
Yes, 100%. We just decided to do the landing page. We didn't want to go too in depth in terms of journeys and stuff. It was just a kind of overview of what things could look like.
Okay, awesome. Thank you.
So yeah, just some comments coming out. Consistency of design, make large clickable actions for the tremor, check contrast of secondary font against the background, remove the red, opting for a more friendly color that isn't, Crystal's moving mystically, allow zooming for magnification tools for the low vision users. Small font could either be spaced out a bit or the font size could be increased to help people with dyslexia read product title names. Cool, that's 2 minutes left.
I'm also going to read a few of them. Avoid using all caps. Allow zooming for magnification tools, so that's for low vision people. And we have a screenshot there of 2 red dots. The one is a red that says save, and the other one is a slightly more pinkish red with an X on it. And these says that these could be mistaken for action buttons, but yeah, they might just be a label. Then there's like a small little looks like a snack bar. It says get deals and promo alerts on products you love to buy, and it looks like a modal, and it says this is really small notice, but this can be easily missed. Check contrast of secondary font against the background. The smaller font could either be spaced out a bit, or the font size could be increased to help people with dyslexia read product title names. The price of the item is currently bigger than the description. If the user does not know what the item is, then they won't buy it. Would a limit amount? Okay.
They do like their red quite a lot.
They really do. Manda, I see you have your hands up.
Yes, I just wanted to ask if Ranesh has had any experience using the Checkers website, and if he has any insights or any other e-commerce stores, because I think that would also be valuable for us.
Definitely.
So I haven't used the Checkers website specifically. I'm just quickly looking at it now, actually. There's one website that is the bane of my life. It's called Discam. If you ever try to go to the products, if you do a search, for example, and you drag your mouse over the product, instead of exposing the description that you're seeing on the product, it gives you the price. It gives you the add to basket buttons. It gives you the action buttons. So my poor screen reader can't tell me what am I looking at on the product list.
It gives you everything except the one thing you need, and that's to know what it is that you're looking at.
Yeah. It doesn't give you the pricing. It doesn't give you what are you looking at. It doesn't give you, it doesn't give you anything, basically.
That's frustrating.
And obviously this game also has a color issue with the white and the green. Doesn't give you very good contrasts. But generally I tend to stick to stores that I know, because it's also much easier to work with memory than it is to always try to figure out where's what on the website. We'll learn over time where the search button is, for example, or where the the different landmarks are on the page that we're looking for, and just go straight to those, which makes navigation so much easier for us. And that's why, stick to what I know.
Yes, I can understand that. That makes sense.
Sorry, I have a follow-up question if I could jump in. It's Mandy. Are there any apps or websites that are great for accessibility that you use, Ranesh?
Those that are outside of the disability community are, there are some of them, and they're becoming more frequent. again, I'll use different things for different purposes. Again, also as a developer myself, or somebody trained in that arts, it's, I figure things out and get things where I want them to be. Like I said, memory helps so much. So even if the site isn't perfectly designed for us, we adapt.
Mm.
Again, if you want to go and take a look at some really good ones, you can go to. I haven't checked out the what is it? The one Deirdre mentioned at the beginning. Yeah.
WCAG.
That one, I haven't checked that one, but I have looked at, like I said, Disability Foundation websites, the American Association for the Blind, for example, the manufacturer of my own screen reader that if you look at them, they're very well designed.
Yes, sorry, I should have been more specific. I was meaning, websites you shop or services you use.
Shop and that kind of stuff. A lot of the ones are surprisingly good. If you look at your Takealot, your Amazon, your Clicks also has very nice layouts that are, again, they're better than Discamp. But again, those are really good examples, I think.
Great, thanks so much.
Mandla, you had your hand still raised, but I see it's gone now. Do you have another question?
No, I think
Okay.
I didn't have another question. I'm not sure why it was up.
Okay, cool.
Cool. I think let us move on to the next exercise again, just to be a bit time conscious. So what we're going to do is just divide everybody up into some breakout rooms. Deirdre, do you have control to do breakout rooms? Or Crystal?
Let me see. I do have control of breakout rooms. Would you look at that?
Awesome. Hey, glad someone does. I don't. Cool. So what we're going to do is just separate you guys into 4 breakout rooms. So number 1, we'll focus on the essential or the slight tremor. Number 2, we'll focus on the anxiety or the depression focus. Number 3, we'll do dyslexia. And number 4, we'll do partially sighted. And we'll just, Kruger.
Before you send us out to breakout rooms for Renee, for Renesh, I just want you, Jonathan, maybe wherever he's being sent to, somebody must be there to sort of help him with knowing that the breakout room automatically brings you back to the main room, and there's like a countdown, and for him, he can't see, even his screen reader doesn't work. So just, he needs to have somebody in that room to sort of tell him, hey, this is what's happening. We've got 5 seconds or 5 minutes left to wrap up.
Yeah, definitely.
So thanks so much for reminding me and mentioning that, Karabo. That was Karabo, right?
Yes,
Yeah.
yes, very much.
It's actually not so much the screen reader, it's the fact that Zoom isn't fully accessible either.
Oh yeah, sorry. Yes, I forgot to say
No worries.
that.
I mean, there's a whole bunch of stuff there, like the chats and that just, unless I'm typing it, it's hard to read.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's quite crazy that all the tools we seem to use the most are either not very well designed or not accessible friendly. But yeah, so what we're going to do is just put, I think, 20 minutes on the clock, and we're going to ask you to please design a checkout process for your particular area of focus. Deirdre, can I ask you to just control that breakout room for us? Yep.
I'm gonna start sending everybody to their breakout rooms now. There'll be about 5 participants in a room. And yeah, so whoever is in the room with Renesh, yeah, please also just assist him to be able to put some stuff on the board. He's a very valuable asset to have.
I see Howard has dropped off. Thanks for joining us. Good luck with the work deadlines. And then Deirdre, can you just leave you and me out, and we can just kind of float around if there's any questions or anything.
Okay, cool. I'm just gonna start renaming the rooms quickly so that everybody knows what they're doing.
Jono, are you still there?
Yes, I am.
Can I just ask you a favor?
Yes, sure.
Seeing as you said you work at Intellect, could you take a look at your websites or ask somebody there to just check the labels on their websites?
I will do exactly
But
that.
what I mean is just a few days ago, I was on your recruitment page and the edit boxes that just say plain edit fields, their labels aren't actually nested there. So a person with a screen reader, for example, has no idea what to enter.
So that's very interesting. Thanks for bringing that to our attention. We will definitely pass that on to the relevant guys, and I'm sure they'll fix it post-haste.
No problem. Thanks so much for passing it on.
Yeah, definitely. Only a pleasure. Thank you.
Alrighty. I'm gonna start opening all the rooms now. So yeah, I'll see everybody there.
Cool.
Nothing. Boom.
Watching everything now.
Yeah, from a linguistics thing, you do want to make it as simple as possible, and so next with a arrow is always a good idea.
We did head back to the main meeting room, which was a bit of a surprise. But just so you know, we're back in the big with everyone else.
I did tell everybody that happens, eh?
I was not expecting it. I've never done the breakout rooms before, and it was just kind of got back here. Hi everyone.
Yeah. So how did everybody find this? So don't worry, there's no marking or anything. It's we just want to figure out and just want to chat a bit about your experience designing for accessibility. So how was it?
Daunting.
I found it very useful having Crystal having dyslexia and speaking about her experience. So I found that very insightful.
To concur on that with regards to the kerning, that was also something new to take into consideration.
Yeah, and then also from a hierarchy perspective as well as to how you put things together. I think a lot of designs are not following hierarchy in terms of how it might disturb a person with dyslexia to read. So that's something interesting as well.
Yeah, likewise, it was great to have Rinesh also guide us with the stuff we've been trying, understanding kind of the page order of elements and how that works, labeling of actions, that sort of thing. That's been really cool.
I'll just ask everybody, especially those with dyslexia, are you guys familiar with which font faces? I know Vitana is a very good font face for dyslexia. Any other recommendations on, nice font faces?
I don't know of any other. I have a friend who's dyslexic, but I think it could be a good idea to test some fonts with her.
So I do know there's actually a list of the Dyslexic Foundation of America, I think it's called, actually has a list of dyslexic fonts. So you can just do a search. I just was curious from a, from a user perspective.
So I just Googled, and as per the meme it is that everybody says Comic Sans sucks, it says that Comic Sans is actually a very good font. And then Verdana, Tahoma, Trebuchet, Open Sans. Yeah.
I also think it's how you, the sizes and the thickness and kerning and all of those factors.
Yeah, for me, oh, sorry.
No, please go.
Sorry. The thing that bugs me the most is when people use medium and bolded and extra bolded, condensed fonts. Those really catch me off guard. But my favorites that I always stick to is Arial. It's a little bit basic, and then Helvetica New. It's what I've gotten used to, but a lighter font. And then I'm a sucker for the treading and kerning of giving my words breathing space and my sentences breathing space so I can properly see it.
Yeah, I think something that's cool about that is, I don't know about anybody else, but by the end of the day, my eyes are quite strained from looking at a screen all day. So this once again ties into the curb cut that I spoke about earlier. So adding some breathing room and, you know, increasing leading and kerning so that it's easier to read for somebody who is dyslexic. By the time of the day that we are tired, it reads as good for us as well. So that's the cool thing about being inclusive in your design. You're not hurting anybody by being inclusive. In fact, you're making it better for everyone.
Absolutely, and thank you so much for bringing up the bold. That is...
Yeah, I think it's really cool that we had an accessibility session with people who struggle with accessibility. It made gaining that empathy even better and helps us understand the struggles even better as well, so that hopefully in our next design attempt, we can make it a little bit better than it was before.
Deirdre, if I could just add in there to the question that was posed earlier on, like how do we get accessibility to the forefront and how do we bring it in? And I just want to get back to that comment where I was saying we normalize it. So there are certain things that I've normalized with the way I design. And if any developer knows me, they know my fonts don't go under 12. And sometimes my clients say to me, but it's really big and the screen that you've designed. And I'm like, yes, but it includes everybody. I know, you know, we want petite and bespoke designs, but I just don't go there with my software and my web designs anymore. And I've normalized certain standards. And sometimes it does take away from doing really, really bespoke and finesse work. But now we have the challenge of making that bespoke and finessed in its own sense.
No, I 100% agree with you. And before you know it, it becomes second nature and you don't think about it differently anymore. And it's just part of your thinking, because it is exactly that. It shouldn't be a mission or a schlep or anything like that to design to be inclusive. It should just be the only way of designing. And yeah, the more we advocate for it and the more we start educating people around it, we become allies as well. And then more people will find it as normal and second nature. And before we know it, we've got a great accessible world, which is the dream, right? But we all start somewhere. Manda, you've got your hand up.
Yeah, and what I've also noticed is that I really hate dribble because it kind of gives this notion that all those aesthetic things that are actually not functional, because most of what's put up on dribble is not functional and hasn't been tested and no one's using it. But then a lot of designers get their inspiration from dribble, which is completely the wrong thing. And even UX designers, which is completely the wrong thing, because dribble is just aesthetics. And if you are creating something, it has to be functional, and it has to be functional for all. Yeah. Yes, it's a very difficult task to do, but just learning and just trying to include everyone is what we need to do, instead of just trying to make these fancy, nice looking dribble websites that don't actually function.
Yeah, no, I 100% agree with you. Form follows function. And I don't give a crap if something is pretty, right? Because Doesn't matter if it's pretty, but I can't interact with that. It's just going to make me want to throw my laptop across the room. Obviously help if it's aesthetically pleasing, but ultimately it needs to be functional. It needs to work for everybody. And that's even more beautiful, to have a non-frustrated person looking at something and interacting with something.
That's Don Norman's book, I think, The Design of Everyday Things.
Yep.
He chats about form versus function. And
yeah.
Like my favorite example is probably cited Norman Boys, that kettle example where they talk about this beautifully designed kettle, but it's got no handle. So how do you use it?
Yeah. I quickly want to read Donat's question. Would it be a good design choice to allow the customers/visitors of a website to allow them to be able to adjust the font and kerning based on some preset options? And I asked this while applying it to aspects apart from font and kerning. Then Crystal replied with, I do not know how people would be able to do that. I know we can go into inspect and do some changes, but giving people that option, that would probably be a plugin tool. Yeah, I mean, I guess we can see like how strange a website can go when we start zooming in, just using the zoom function in your web browser, for instance. And I guess something like that would be possible. It would probably be smarter to have it in a plugin tool. But at some point, the design's just going to go whack. So there would have to be like a cutoff point.
My question on that would be, how do you sell business? Because that's traditional dev work.
So can I just butt in on this point?
Yeah.
That's cool. Okay, I need to just double check if this tool still exists. But the screen reader that I use, the company that got taken over, actually developed a plugin for this purpose. I'll just check if I can find it, and I will post it either in the chat if I find it by now, or I will post it in the meetup group. But the plugin actually keeps the structure stable, and keeps the font and all of that in line. And it also has I think it has reading functionality, or they were talking about adding reading functionality to it. So that plugin actually covers the whole thing. It's just a matter of getting business to, either cover the develop, either pay for it to import the plugins, or obviously you'd want to add those plugins to the base CSS.
Yeah, and that's a good point. Donat also added in the chat. Thank you. Crystal, you've got your hand raised.
Yeah, I just want to say, because I see, we time is running. And I just want to say thanks to you and Jono for including something like dyslexia and anxiety and those type of disability and accessibility problems and challenges we're being faced with at the moment, because I think we always need to take a look at what's currently happening. And currently in the world, your anxiety rates are going up. A lot of it is being related to COVID and how people have experienced the virus and also the times. So being online is becoming a form of escapism. And if we can design inclusively there for people that are suffering with anxiety and depression and ADHD, and there's a lot of things that hold hands with anxiety at the moment, that's really something we can think about and really consciously decide what colors we're using, how we're inviting people into our spaces. And then the other one about dyslexia, I think dyslexia is a problem that we're going to see more and more with just the rate of how users aren't reading as much as they're supposed to, how people's attention spans are starting to run really thin at the moment. So I can see those I keep calling them problems, but those accessibility challenges are just going to keep being on the rise. And it's really cool to start thinking of how in today's climate we're looking at those issues.
No, 100%.
I just want to echo that. Thank you so much for adding all of this. And, you know, I know there's been a big push in the US from a federal perspective to, you know, make this a big deal and really bring it into, you know, into reality, because it is actually part of the American legal system.
Yes. Canada also has quite a strict law on accessibility, so it's called AYODA, and their minimum requirements is the web accessible web content accessibilities AA standard. So, and it's quite hectic, and if you don't adhere to those rules, then for instance, if you have an app, they remove it. So yeah, the more countries also that start advocating for legislation around this, you know, the better, because, you know, unfortunately, it's going to force companies to move into this direction because people don't see the monetary value in that. But yeah, it's good that it is happening. I am conscious of time. There's not a lot of time left. So I see, Candace, you also have your hand up.
I just want to ask a quick question. So like for accessibility, half the fight is the designers, but the other half is like the developers. It's like, where's that line? Because you can't sit and go like you can design a great button, but if they don't tag it properly, it means nothing. You know what I mean? If they don't label it properly, it means nothing. So like, how do you like, you know what I mean? You can't sit and watch them all day and be like, you know what I mean? So where's that line then? You know, 100%. Is there a way to get them to do it? Because I don't think they learn about accessibility, you know, really.
Education, you know, more than anything, it's education. If you can show people the value in why they should do it, and I think that's also where the empathy comes in, is they'll be more inclined to do it. Unfortunately, it's not just and obviously this is a bit of a generalization, but it's not as easy as just to say everybody wants to do it. You will find people that are passionate about it, but I find education and empathy goes a long way.
Yeah, no, I agree. And it's the same with like, how do we as designers decide, you know, where do we start and how do we draw the line? It's exactly the same. As soon as, like Crystal said, like she's pretty hectic with her development team. On the daily, I like to trash my devs' designs or implemented designs. And I'm like, this is swag contrast. What did you do here? There's no alt tag. So I'm just becoming like really annoying. And they've just accepted that. But now I have found that sometimes, so we have a few interns on our team now, and they've implemented a few things with bad contrast. And one of the developers called them out for that. So, you know, you kind of start influencing people. This is the type of influencer you want to be. You want to influence people to be advocates for accessibility. Irfan, did I pronounce your name correctly?
You did, yeah, thank you.
Okay, awesome.
Yeah, just to give a bit of development perspective. So I'm a developer myself. So yeah, I think empathy and awareness are probably the two biggest things that would be, I mean, go a long way to catering for that. But something I have also noticed recently, I'd say over the last couple of years or so, it might have been there longer, but if you look at frameworks like Bootstrap, for example, the code that they give you out of the box already, I know, has some of the HTML attributes for screen readers. So at least from a design perspective, if there is something that, you know, where you might have a bit more control, is just looking into, or maybe having a say in choosing the frameworks that are used. I'm sure Material as well probably has some of that. But I've definitely noticed with Bootstrap, for example, the UI kits and the UI elements that they have, like the modals and the buttons and stuff, they have started including, you know, the accessibility elements as well.
Yeah, no, 100%. And I think that's the big thing, right? Is it has to start with someone, and it has to start somewhere. And if we all kind of sit back and we just say, oh well, whatever, this is not for me, then it's never going to get anywhere, and it's never going to pick up traction. So yeah, it's just that that first step. I'm adding two links in the chat as well. So the first one is some amazing posters that the UK government did on accessibility. So it's specifically for people on the autistic spectrum, for screen readers, low vision, physical disabilities, deaf or hard of hearing, and dyslexia. And it's really great because it's just a quick do this, don't do this. And then the second link I've also added is cards for humanity. So that's just those little quick personas that I spoke about earlier. If you're not sure and you kind of just want a little bit of direction. I see that we have reached our time. If anybody does have any questions, I'll stay on for a few more minutes. Otherwise, everybody's always welcome to contact me on LinkedIn and Jono on LinkedIn if you have any questions there. And yeah, we'll make the recording available on, no, Shizwe said that she's going to upload it to YouTube, so you can share it with anybody there. Yeah, always happy to have a conversation around this. So yeah, just drop us a message and we'll take it from there. So yeah, we'll stay on a few more minutes for any more questions that anybody might have. But yeah, thank you everybody for attending and listening to us ramble on about this. Quite passionate, so I can go on forever. So yeah, thank you so much for attending. I know it is quite late.
Yeah, thank you very much, guys. I've got to drop off, but just to echo what Deirdre said, feel free to reach out on LinkedIn or any other platform that you happen to have my details on. Yeah, thanks very much, guys, and have a good evening.
Cool.
Thanks, guys. Well done.
Thanks, Jono. Thanks, Deirdre.
Thank you.
Thank you. It was great.
Yeah, and guys, join us for the next IDF one. We'll let you guys know when that's at. Insta.
Bye.
Bye. Bye.
That's me clapping. That's me clapping, Deirdre. Nice one.
Thanks, bravo.
Thank you. Thank you so much for attending.
Yeah, that was really awesome.
I'm glad you guys enjoyed it.
Yo, Karabo, Deirdre, and Jono, you guys knocked it out of the park.
I'm really glad. I'm so stressed about this. I was like, oh, I just want this to be good. Yeah, because everyone's always like, oh, accessibility is such a mission, and it's not.
Yeah. No, it's not a mission. I think it's all bullshit. People, it's kind of like project management. If your product owner, which is the person that really owns, you know, the roadmap, if they don't include it, you're never going to get anywhere. You know what I mean? So I think the most people that we actually need to include in this conversation, Crystal, is product owners. More and more of them need to come in and listen, you know, listen to learn, because it's going to be really important, because they're the ones that really control the budget. So if you tell them that I need somebody who's going to be accountable for accessibility, they're already thinking costs for how long, you know, and if you're building a product, let's say for the next 12 months, they're already thinking, okay, wait, Karabo, is this person going to be charging me a shitload or a little bit, you know? So the question is, we can have a voice, but the voice doesn't mean shit if that person is not given the power.
Yeah. And you know, Karabo, there are so many companies, especially with software at the moment, where clients need to take accountability for their accessibility needs, employees. So as we build internal software, like, are we meeting the needs of their employees? And then another thing for me is as well is what I loved about what you brought in, Karabo, and I would love to see how we bring this into accessibility needs in South Africa, is catering for a lower LSM that has data restrictions and actual device restrictions. Like how are we bringing accessibility to the forefront?
To feature phones. Yeah.
Which is, and I'm still hoping somebody comes out of the woodwork and is like, hey, I want to talk about the lower LSM and how we do UX and development for them in our country, because that for me is a burning topic on so many levels. Because if you look at our disability if you look at our disability stats in the country, is a lot of our disabled people that fall in that bracket are in the lower LSM in our country. So how are what are we doing for them?
So can I just jump in here?
Yeah.
I think the reason all of us disabled people are in the lower LSM is just there isn't this awareness and adoption of people. So I'm really glad that these events are so well attended, and thank you to all of you for hosting it. As for feature phones, those things are just never going to be accessible. The operating system and hardware just doesn't support it, unfortunately. But luckily, USSD is accessible by design because it's a text-based system.
Yeah.
But on a feature phone, you just don't have the system just isn't designed there. I know when I had a feature phone, you kind of had to go and get another 3,000, 4,000 Rand software on the phone to get it close to accessible. And you know what? Back then, that was, almost the same price as the phone.
Yeah.
Mm.
No, I think it's Africa/South Africa. We've got a unique set of challenges that other people or other countries do not have. And this is something that I've seen over and over again with products or software that was created in first world countries. You can see that a lower LSM was never considered as part of the market. And it's obviously quite frustrating because, it's so easy, once again, like if you just design from the get-go to be accessible and to be inclusive, it's so easy going forward. But yeah, you see that more and more. I read an article on Apple Pay and how, so many countries are aiming to go completely cashless, like no physical cash anymore. It's just not a reality here. It's never going to happen because that's just not the nature of how things happen here. And there's nothing wrong with that, but yeah, it's not good to design for, I don't want to call it a niche, but like something that's standard in one country doesn't mean it's standard in the other one. And that's a whole different ball game, is being inclusive for different cultures and different countries as well. So yeah, it's hard, and there's no one right way or wrong way to do it. I have been part of a project where we did an app that was available worldwide, and it's hard. It is really, really hard, and you are going to get it wrong. But it's okay if you get it wrong, because that's how you learn, and you move on from that mistake and you improve for the next time.
Deirdre, what we also as a country is we have a very low adoption rate. We are type of people that we find things very hard. And there was a company 3 years ago called Eureka that made like BBM, those barcodes, those black ones with the dots and stuff.
The QR code.
QR codes, thank you very much. So they made QR code tags for security guards and car guards and people that do small little jobs where you could scan their tag and then tip them via that tag, like a 5 Rand or 10 Rand, because their problem was not a lot of people carry cash around. And now we want to move to a cashless system. Was that a fail of note? Because those car guards were like, I'm not going to carry a tag, and I don't want to open up a bank account because I don't want to have fees on my bank account. And the problems just started escalating. And we in our country, we've got a lot of stigmas we need to break, and we need to work on our adoption rates with technology and digitizing things.
I think there's also immense distrust, and that distrust doesn't come from nowhere, right? It's unfortunately, there's quite a bit of fraud and, fake messages. There's so many things that go into this. So there's a lot of distrust, and unfortunately, we just don't trust digital systems. And when you look at Japan, I think Japan is an excellent example. Japan is such a techno-forward country in so many ways. They almost exclusively use cash. They do not have many places where you can buy stuff with a card. And it's such a big contrast, right? But it's just, that's their culture. And they've kind of adapted to it, understanding that cool, they're very like far ahead in terms of tech, but at the same time, very much still ingrained in the old ways of doing things. And I think it's going to be very common as you know, tech progresses worldwide, that there's certain things that because of culture, you're not going to get rid of it.
I gotta drop off, guys. This has been awesome.
Okay, thank you so much for attending.
And thanks, Deirdre. Thanks, Ranesh. Thanks, Donat. You guys must have a rocking evening.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Cool.
You too.
Ranesh,
Thanks so much,
Donat,
guys.
any more questions, or can I end this session?
No, we can end this. I just stayed on in case anybody else had any questions.
Cool. Yeah, Ranesh, thank you so much for attending. I think it's really, really awesome, and you bring a lot of insight that not only other people but including myself do not necessarily have, and yeah, very, very valuable for me as well to bring into my considerations when I design. So yeah, thank you for your attendance and your insights. Really, really awesome.
Always a pleasure. And you guys can always reach out. You can reach out to the meetup. I've got all my stuff up there. The social media is there. And sorry for butting in all the time. But
no,
I'm
absolutely.
glad I could help you guys.
Please do. The more, the better. No, thank you so much.
What I wanted to say was, I think it really does make a difference having somebody who can weigh in the opinion for those of us who don't understand what it's like and don't know what you go through. So yeah, thank you. As well from my side, I learned quite a bit.
Thanks, Donat. I'm glad you learned something.
I told you, there's something you want to learn.
So just for context, Donat and I know each other outside of like this. Yeah. And he told me he's here to learn, and I was like, you have high hopes from me today.
And I did say it would be pure arrogance if I had, what's his name, said that would not be the case. So I said I will definitely learn something, and I did. I definitely did.
No, that's good. Well, cool. Yeah, thanks for attending, guys, and thank you for all of the questions and everything. I hope you enjoyed it. And yeah.
One last one.
Yes.
When is the next time?
Follow us on Instagram, and I will also let Deirdre know. And so it's usually the last week of the month and the second week of the next month. So we should be launching a talk. We're going to start promoting it soon. So look out for the 27th of May.
Okay, awesome. Thank you. Bye, guys.
Awesome. All right, everybody.
Thanks.
Have a good evening.
Thanks so much.
Bye.
Take it. Bye.